there's a certain skill that some kinds
Yeah.
of lawyers need to have or entrepreneurs need to have, which is like, even if you don't build the stuff, you need to be able to translate it. You need to be able to understand it conceptually, translate it in everyday language. And lawyers who can do that, they're special unicorns.
All right. So welcome to the You Are Lawyer podcast. Austin Brittenham, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I love talking to lawyers. I love talking to entrepreneurs and creators, right? So there are so many legal podcasts out there, but I want to talk about everything outside of school and courtroom. So Austin, would you tell the audience where you are from and where you went to law school?
I am from Boise, Idaho, born and raised. I did college and life after college in the Northwest, so Seattle and south of Seattle. And then I went to the University of Mississippi, moved, over 1,000 miles away to go and study law school at the University of Mississippi.
Yeah. So did you know lawyers growing up, or were you the first one in your family?
I'm a first gen. I will say I did debate for 3 years in high school, 4 years in college.
Yeah.
So many of my peers went to law school. People older than me, people younger than me. I just took some time to sort of do other stuff before. But
Yeah.
for my family, like, I'm a first gen lawyer.
Okay. I love that. I went to law school at 28. So I took some time off as well. I think it makes a big difference when like you've been in the world and you don't go straight
Yes.
through. Yeah.
Yes. Companies don't want to be counseled by like a 25-year-old who is still learning some professional skills. But at the same time, like, the K to JD experience is kind of beneficial because you're in it. You don't know what life is like otherwise. And even while you're right, like, the average law school age is around 28 in the US. Like, I went to a school where the average age was like 22. So there were very few of us who were anything older than, like, I graduated in the spring and I went to law school in the fall.
Yeah, and it's really funny because like you meet people when you're in law school and they're like, "Oh yeah, we're the same," and I'm like, "You're a child."
Play nice.
I know. But okay, so that's a big jump, right? Moving to the South, to Mississippi.
That's right.
I'm from Ohio and I went to law school in Louisiana, which is a really big difference too. So what was that kind of cultural education like, being in just a different state?
Well, so listen, I went from like West Coast to the South. I went from major metropolitan, like, downtown area to a rural college town. And I did it in the pandemic. And so not any of the cultural differences that you can imagine between the West and the South, food, people, clothing, music. And then you add on top, like, I was in a big city that really was diligent or conservative about COVID protections. So they were one of the last cities to undo. They were one of the first cities to shut down. Like, and you compare that to a place in the South where, like, they cared in a different way. And so there was, I think, a lot of culture shock. And then just going back into school in general, going into law school compared to undergrad, it was a big time of change. But I think for a lot of people, COVID was a big time of change. So
yeah,
we got through it.
I remember I was working at a big law firm. I was there for about 5 years, and COVID happened at like 3.5 years. And we were scrambling for all the paralegals to get laptops because before 2020, you were just working on your desktop computer in the office.
I see.
And so it was a really big deal. And I was like, we're not even old, but you just didn't do that. It just wasn't the culture of law firms. Maybe other offices, but law firms, that was not the culture.
Yeah, so I was at Amazon's headquarters. And so if I'm remembering right, I think the first case in a major US city was in Seattle, and it was recorded in an Amazon office. So they were doing contact tracing. They were emailing all of the employees, like, before I think there was public consciousness about what those phrases meant.
Yeah.
The building shut down before, the world did. And so for Amazon, it was super easy. Like, we already had laptops. I worked with a geographically distributed team. Like, they were like, okay, take home your laptops. You'll be back in like a month or two. Don't worry about it. And like, I took home my laptop and I shipped it to them months later when I was done working.
Yeah. My husband works in a tech space, like HR payroll type stuff. And they went remote first. So like everyone went home for the pandemic, and then he's never been back home. We actually moved from Kentucky back to Ohio because they were like, we're never going back in the office. I was like, great.
One of my coworkers like left Seattle, moved to Missouri, I think, got like an apple orchard and like found a man, had a kid, and Amazon was like, all right, return to office. And she's like, Like
What
how?
about my apples?
What about my apples? Not the kid, not the husband,
Right.
whatever, but on my apples.
That's hilarious. Yeah, it's so fascinating, like what people find interesting when they don't have to be in the office. Because I read something and it was saying that like you really only do like 3% of actual work in the office. The rest of it is like water cooler talk or pretending to be busy. And I was like, fair. That's why I would rather you
Yeah.
just give me my 3 hours of work and let me just be at home and then like have the rest of my time. But so, Austin, you build AI tools for lawyers,
That's right.
which there's so many layers to that because lawyers and technology, not the closest, they don't really walk hand in hand. And then,
Yeah, yeah.
well, that's not true. Young lawyers love technology.
That's right.
Older, more established, 20 years into the
That's
practice
right.
lawyers do not really care for change.
That's right.
So, why did you decide to create AI tools for lawyers? And what is your company called?
Sure. My company's name is Second Chair. Like litigators out there probably know. I mean, I started in part because I had like an AI company in like the late 20 teens before law school. When I was in law school, I was just looking around being like, a lot of this is sort of clunky, inefficient. It's not the things that drive real meaningful value for clients, right? Like, don't get me wrong, like it matters that we as lawyers like fill out forms and that the forms are correct. And in fact, sometimes that's some of the most precise or important work we can do. But a lot of the time, it's just not. Like, I don't know, for some lawyers, like it's just glorified paper pushing,
Yeah.
like a couple extra like steps, right? And I'm like, this is the stuff that like doesn't drive true value for people who are seeking legal counsel. And so if we can use software to make us go faster or work more efficiently or be better, like we can distribute more justice, we can serve more people, we could there's or just like have more vacation. Like we can
Hmm.
just go home sooner and not have as many late nights. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, that's funny because that plays into everything we've been saying, right? If you can be more efficient, then you can really only work for 3 hours and not worry about stretching out the 5 hours you're trying to bill or 8 hours or whatever.
That's right.
Um, so, do you find that lawyers give you a lot of pushback on why they need these tools?
Okay. So it's definitely age based. So I think the younger folks have less concerns.
Yeah.
But I also think that sometimes they are maybe they're rushing to use it and maybe not being as thoughtful or considerate, thinking about data privacy, data security, those kinds of things, because they're just tech natives.
Hmm.
At the same time, I think from talking to professionals who have been sort of around tech adoption among lawyers, like I'm hearing that the way that older folks, partners, more senior folks are using or interested in AI tools is different than other technologies in the past because they're really seeing the massive value it can deliver, time savings, cost savings, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And the other thing too that I hear a lot less, but there's some general research about AI that suggests that boomers, Gen X are more inclined to use it or their relationship to the tools are more natural. They grew up in like a work environment when they were young professionals earlier in their career where you asked someone, you had an assistant, you had, folks younger than you, whatever. And it was like, hey, do this for me, make this, answer these questions. And then sort of the internet became popular and it was like, go research this, figure it out. Like, don't ask me questions, like you do it. And that's, I think that characterizes how I got used to this kind of stuff. It was like, I'm going to Google it before I go and ask somebody a question. Like I
Yeah.
can figure this out. But it actually, the way that we use a lot of generative AI tools or AI tools more generally involves sort of, you're telling this AI to do something, make something, help me out on something. And that kind of relationship with software is more native to, folks who are more partner or more senior in a law firm.
Okay. I think that's a really interesting perspective because you didn't say, hey, we're going to ignore the boomers. You said, well, every generation will need tools, right? Like, even if you're not a native tech person,
Yeah,
we still can create tools that are for you. I like that. It's like you're serving that demographic. They
yeah,
still can use tech, even if it's just at their own kind of speed.
that's right. And two, like I said, it's like sort of the way that they use it is there's cohort data, not in like legal AI tools, but AI tools generally that suggests that that demographic has actually onboarded it proportionately quite faster than other demographics.
Okay.
And so even as we think about like lawyers being slow to use new technology, that age cohort certainly is not as slow. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think that's really cool. So I got to get a little bit more information. You said you ran an AI company before you even went to law school,
A different startup. It didn't work out, but
but
yeah, we
still, what a risk. What was it?
um, kind of like learning games, like think Duolingo, except
Mm-hmm.
it was for public speaking and argumentation. So the front end of the company was again sort of like gamified free learning for purposes of helping folks learn to be better, like learn formal argumentation, public speaking in a remote environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the back end, the way I had created these learning games made it so that we could create a large data set for purposes of teaching an AI how to make textual argument. But you can imagine before 2020, like people didn't really believe in like online education very much. And they
Yeah.
especially did not believe that like argumentation or public speaking was a thing that you could or should learn remotely. So it was just like poor timing in the market. And then
Yeah. I mean, I guess that means you need to like bring it back out next year. The market
yeah,
has changed.
that's what one of my law school guidance counselors said. She was
Yeah.
like, "No, you should actually just like do this again at law school." And I was like, "Well, I think there's some other stuff I can work on."
Well, I'm the wrong one to say because I'm gonna tell you to do it all. I have 2 YouTube channels. I have this. I have like I do all the stuff.
Sure.
Um, but I'm listening to you, and it's kind of making me laugh because it's like a secretive early adopter. I was using Duolingo 2019. I
Okay.
would take my breaks at the law firm and do 15 minutes.
Let's
And
go.
this was before it was even popular. But the funny thing is, I think once it got popular, I was over it. I was like, oh, now you guys know about it.
Okay, so she's actually like a technology hipster, is what I'm.
Yeah. So
You
I'm
just don't
kind
think
of
of yourself
like,
that way.
yeah, I'm like, actually, I think I was kind of ahead of the game. Earlier today, I was recording like a tutorial about how to edit on Final Cut Pro. And, my husband's like, there's so many videos. I'm like, but not for girls. There's not videos for people who don't want to spend 12 hours. I just want my video to look good in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm kind of a techie. So there's different levels to tech. I'll say that.
Well, and I think I see that as like from sort of a business owner side, right? There's a certain skill that some kinds
Yeah.
of lawyers need to have or entrepreneurs need to have, which is like even if you don't build the stuff, you need to be able to translate it. You need to be able to understand it conceptually, translate it in everyday language.
Yes.
And lawyers who can do that, we work with a couple who help us with like our intellectual property and stuff like that, who are themselves like engineers. They're special unicorns, but to your point, like you can still understand it without having to like go and I don't know, like write some lines.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point. When I decide I'm going to do something, I go 100%. So I paid someone to teach me how to make like a successful YouTube channel
Uh-huh.
before I had like 2 videos out. And then I was like, okay, now I need to do it. And one of their things that they said was like, you have to edit yourself so that you can understand why you're going to pay the editor so much money.
Interesting.
And that
Yeah.
like blew my mind. And I was like, what do you mean? And now I work with podcasters. They'll be like, here's your thing. I want the episode up in an hour. No, that's not how it works. And I'm like, oh, but Kyla, you've taken all of the pain points away that they think it is that quick. And I was like,
Yeah.
wow. So,
We see that from a product side where like people are touching it and like for them like this one thing is going wrong and they're like, oh, okay, whatever, like can't you solve this? It's so easy. And it's like, no,
yeah.
actually, like that's what is a small pain point to you is like hours and hours of engineering.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and we pride ourselves on building something that is so intuitive, so easy, such that if you're not a tech person, like if you're like lawyers don't need to be tech people, we're lawyers at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
So we want it to be easy and intuitive, but it actually takes a lot of hard engineering to do that.
Yeah. Easy and intuitive. And we want it to work like now. Like,
Yeah.
I need to be able to touch it and it works.
And lawyers, compared to any other profession that I've seen, have such like error tolerance. Right?
Oh, yeah. 100%. Yeah. No, you built it wrong. I didn't use it wrong. So, Austin, after law school, like, did you work at any law firms? Did you intern, or were you immediately like, no, straight back to being an entrepreneur?
So I worked at a small law firm doing sort of the firm was IP corporate counsel
Okay.
stuff. So I spent a summer doing that. The owner of that firm is now my GC. He sold his practice, and now I guess I'm his boss technically. That's weird.
Okay.
But then I also worked for a transnational company doing sort of in-house stuff. So the reason I moved to Mississippi to go to law school was because I wanted to do air and space law. And the University of Mississippi has, by many metrics, like the best space lab program in the country. So that's why I said if I'm serious about being a space lawyer, like I'm going to move to the South, like you, like I'm going to go in 100%. There's no messing around. So I spent a summer at a transnational space company doing like licensing, regulatory space law stuff.
Really cool. Okay. I mean, you
um,
were like meant to be on this show because I'm all about how to like change careers, but bring with you to your new
yeah,
place like all of the tools that you've learned. And it kind of sounds like you've been like collecting all these tools and now you're using them with Second Chair. So,
yeah, yeah. And I think to that point, like I saw, how sort of like a very technically sophisticated small law firm operated. And then I was in house at a big, sort of well financed company or legal department. And I got to see just like difference in the kinds of software that they had, how long it would take to do particular legal tasks because of this software, either access or just knowledge, like same tools, but just like somebody was really skilled with Excel and somebody wasn't, and like that's not what they teach you in like lawyer school, but
yeah.
it kind of makes a difference sometimes
Hmm.
between lawyers. And so again, to your point, like I was sort of like, how do I accumulate all of this into one thing? And so I started the company while I was still in law school. And then since graduating, I've just been doing it full time.
Yeah. Okay. So, but you worked with someone else for a summer and then you kind of, so were you trying to hedge your bet on running your own business? You're like, I got one foot
No,
in, but also I'm going to make sure I'm protected.
no, I thought I was like, I mean, my life plan had been like college, gonna go to law school. I got the right word is distracted with my first company, and then um, went to Amazon because I was just like, I need something to do.
Hmm.
So I did that, and then went back to law school. At law school, it was like I'm going to do space law. Like that's the dream, that's the goal, that's been the goal. I functionally kind of, I don't know, came out of entrepreneurship retirement. I don't know. It was just like if my first company didn't really have the right timing in the market, there was just like this AI boom, and it was faster and cheaper to build products. The products could do more, and they were really well situated for textual work. And of course, that's what lawyers do. And so I was just like,
Yeah.
now's the time. Like, I'm going to shoot my shot, and um, I will have no regrets because I can like become a more traditional lawyer in the future, but I won't have the skills, the knowledge, and the timing that this moment offers me. So
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to take the shot, see what happens.
Yeah. How wise of you. So listen to the audience that's listening. Listen, listen. I did not tell Austin to say any of this, but this is exactly what this show is about, right? Because I feel like as lawyers and even law students, we should take the biggest risk because we know how to mitigate the risk. Like, I don't know why we want to be risk averse when you know how to get out of anything. I'm like, that should make you want to jump like the fastest because, like, you can figure it out. Or even if someone came to you and was like, my neighbor cut down our tree, but it's on the property line, even if you didn't know how to do it, you could refer them to someone. Like,
Yeah.
we know so much stuff. And this is why we need to like be out there and be doing all of the things. Like, yeah, you can work in a courtroom. I'm not trying to say don't do that, but like also open a food truck on the side. Like, do all the stuff as well as
Well,
being a lawyer because like we can figure it out. We can figure out everything.
and the best lawyers are people who have some sort of like knowledge besides the law in the subject domain that they're working on. The easy example in my mind is like if you've done coding, then you become a much more sophisticated like IP lawyer or even just copyright lawyer because you understand like some of the nuances that happen. But
Yeah.
to your point, it's not just coding, right? It's like if you studied psychology or worked in for a therapist or something, and then you start taking on like sort of complex med mal cases involving like psych providers, like the level of nuance you can bring affects legal strategy. It produces better outcomes because you understand the underlying content better. And
Yeah.
that's something that I think is understated sometimes for young lawyers or lawyers in law school.
It is, but it's getting out there. You are like the
Good.
210th episode that I've recorded. So I'm like on a one woman mission to tell everyone. And like
Let's
the
go.
title of the podcast is ironic because you have to be a lawyer or a law school like student or a graduate, but like we're talking about everything but the bar exam because I need people to realize that like
There's more to it.
Being a lawyer is the title, but who are you, right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
okay, cool. Very, very cool. So, Austin, I have two more questions for you.
Sure.
Okay. So, with your business second chair, which I love, like when I saw the title of that, I was like, oh my God, mock trial, and you have that second chair and you always have that support there for you with whatever you need.
That's right.
Do you work with law firms? Do you work with solo practitioners or what?
Yeah, so we can kind of service any size firm, but our general tool off the shelf is really designed for like smalls and solos.
Okay.
Um, so it can do stuff like automatically create a timeline of events out of a collection of documents, or it can turn a single document into a timeline. It can help analyze cases. Very soon, it can help you find a case. Like instead of using Westlaw or Lexis, it will sort of just know the entire universe of U.S. case law. It can help in drafting materials. So I say that because some of those tasks in a larger firm would fall under an associate or a paralegal, but the smalls and solos often like they've got extra room in the budget, but not a whole amount for payroll, taxes, finding the person, and it's like, get me a software tool that's going to help me do this stuff.
Yeah. And then my last question, and I ask this of every guest, the podcast audience is law students or young lawyers, 5 years practicing or less. What would you say to them about what they can do with their law degrees?
Oh, um, JD Advantage jobs, like
JD Advantage jobs,
love them.
not related to the law at all.
Yeah, yeah.
How about we say
Con-
this? How can they take bigger risk knowing that they have their law degree?
Yeah,
What would you say?
listen, there's so many jobs where it's just you they prefer JD candidates without making it an explicit job requirement. And those like I know so many lawyers who got burned doing something and then they went to one of those jobs at a technology company, or the product manager is trying to build a new tool, talk to them instead of talking to the in-house counsel, because the in-house counsel is dealing with the big stuff. So when they need to say like, hey, we want to build a teddy bear that listens to kids and can talk to them and respond to their questions, and someone needs to say like, hey, it probably shouldn't be recording them all the time, like
Yeah.
there's these legal concerns that you should be aware of before you start building, before you waste this time and energy. um, I also think that there's tons of volunteer opportunities out in communities as a way to sort of grow your skill and your professional knowledge. I know the last thing that many of us want to hear is like overworked young professionals is like go volunteer and spend your time and labor for free. But there's so much data that suggests that like being a volunteer in your community, if it's religious, if it's non-religious, sort of we have a set of skills that can help people, even if it's not immediately saying like, here's the legal solution, right? Sometimes just
Yeah.
having a knowledgeable person who can do some counseling in the sort of legal counselor sense of the term, as well as it'll just dramatically increase like your professional network, the folks and that turns into value 5 years in the future in unexpected ways. You meet someone and they refer you to a job because they liked how they got to know you in some other context.
Yeah, it's true. And I would even say, starting your own business, me starting this podcast, those are volunteer at first, right?
Yeah,
You
at
want it to
first.
turn into being paid, but like that's
Right.
volunteering. I think the point is like doing something outside of what you're told, which is just go to work
Yeah.
and then kind of see what else sparks your interest.
Yeah. And there's so many like pro bono clinics, or like, maybe not even pro bono, but like low cost clinics, again, sometimes through religious associations, sometimes not. And it's like, you can just find the right community for you. And there's just so many folks who need support out in the world. Like, the number bounces around, but somewhere between like 8 and 11% of people with legally cognizable harms actually get legal counsel. So
Wow.
90% of people who could experience justice through the law don't get to a lawyer. And that's
Interesting.
remarkable, right? It's sad. And it
Yeah,
suggests that there's, if any of us have extra bandwidth, like we can be helping out in more ways.
hmm, that's true. Now I'm going to have to go look and see where can I help out? What time do I have? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, Austin. Well, thank you so much for this. I know that the audience is going to really enjoy it. And I think that your story, maybe you couldn't connect the dots when it was happening, but looking back at it now, you're like, oh, I borrowed from there and there and there. And look, I've created this. I think that's actually really impressive. So I think the audience is going to enjoy it.
And for the audience, I think that that's how a lot of folks kind of do it, right? Like we've got a theory about how the future is going to look, but it's a lot more windy and crooked path in reality. So
Yeah, it's a lot more fun being the cricket path. So
that's true. That's true. Well, thank you so much for the time. Appreciate it.
of course, of course.